I wrestled with this for a bit. I'll be honest with you. I've taken a couple of different directions, and this morning I really want to slow it down a bit, and I want to break this down the best that I can. My assignment today is not to get you excited. In fact, some of you will leave today and you may not like me from this day forward. But when all is said and done, I will know in my heart that I presented truth the best that I could. Our subject today is Follow Me, and we're going to be looking at this topic for about 4 weeks, maybe even 5. And when I thought about it, I came to the realization that this topic, follow me, these words that Jesus spoke, follow me, outside of his death on the cross for your and my forgiveness, and God's love for you and I, outside of those two subjects, this is the most important subject in the entire Bible. And I'll tell you why. I will just put it simply. Your future in eternity depends on what you do with these two words, follow me. We're not talking about your years on earth. Your eternity after you pass away, your eternity when you stand before God, your eternity will be determined on these two simple words, follow me. These two words, follow me. And you can line up all kinds of stuff in your favor. You can give a lot of money. You can do all kinds of stuff. And God will say, I really don't care about that. I care about two words, follow me. What did you do with that? Now let me just stop, and this is where we're going to slow down for a minute, and I'm going to give you just a little bit of history. Can I do that? Can I give you some history? You see, when we say follow me, and we use terms like that, I became aware that we really don't know what we're talking about. It's so vague in our culture. We don't really grasp what Jesus meant when he said to follow me. We don't grasp it. Because we live in a different culture. We live in a different time. We live with different relationships. We live in a different part of the world. And I want to bring us back to what Jesus meant when he said it in his culture. You see, Jesus came from the Middle East. He came within the first century. He was Jewish, and he was a part of that culture. And when he spoke from that culture. Now, we know that Jesus' words stand the test of time. We know that they cross generations. We know that they cross cultural barriers. We know that they are eternal. But sometimes, without understanding the culture, we lose a bit of the meaning. And that's what I want to bring us back to today, is what did he mean when he said, follow me? You see, in our Western culture, we think he meant, well, that means that I guess I got to go to church more often. That's following him. Or maybe I need to give a little more money in the offering. That would be following him. Or maybe I need to stop cussing. That would be following him. I won't cuss anymore. And we take what he said and we define it within our culture, and in doing so, we lose the meaning of what he said, because he didn't refer to any of that. In fact, the truth be told, when he said it, there wasn't even a church. there was only a synagogue. So he wasn't speaking to Christians in our Christian culture. We think in our culture that to follow Jesus, we do things like, sure, sounds like a nice gig. I'll follow you for Monday through Friday, but I'm not going to follow you on the weekend. Or I'll follow you this week, but I'm going to hook up with so-and-so next week, and I won't follow you then. See, that's what we do. We think it's an on and off. Like I'm going to follow you to the store, or I'm going to follow you to the gas station. And when I decide not to follow you, well, I'm going to make a left or a right, and I'm just going to go my own way. And I'm done following you for the day. But in this culture, the culture that Jesus was speaking, it was a Jewish culture. And the culture at this time believed in the Torah. They believed that the Torah was God's word to Moses, and Moses wrote it. The Torah consisted of the first 5 books of the Bible. If you go back in your Bible to the beginning, and you go book 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, that is what is called the Torah. They believed that the Torah was the very Word of God. And as such, their entire educational system was based on the Torah. So when a child became 6 years of age, he entered school. And school was taught in a synagogue, and school was taught by a rabbi, and he was in school from 6 years of age to age 10. This first level of education was called Bet Sefer. And it was at this level of education, because the Torah was so important in this culture, being the very Word of God, that these children from age 6 to age 10 would memorize the Torah. That was their schooling. Day in and day out, they memorized. They memorized it. Now, when they reached 10 years of age, most students went back to their homes and they apprenticed under their family to learn the family business. And that was the end of it. But those students that had a high aptitude to learning and they were bright, they were invited to the next level of learning, which was from 10 to approximately 15 years of age. And this level of learning was called the Bet Talmud. At this level of learning, they would memorize the entire Old Testament. They would memorize the Talmud. They would memorize major prophets. They would memorize the minor prophets. They would memorize the Proverbs and the Psalms. And at age 15, when they had graduated this level of learning, now these were only the sharpest of the sharp, they were faced with a decision. Do they then go into the family business, or do they continue on? Now, to continue on into the third phase was to petition a rabbi to become his student disciple. Now, rabbis were very selective in whom they chose, because they would only choose somewhere between 10 and 14 students to be disciples. So you had to be really good to be selected by a rabbi. It's kind of like putting your resume out to IBM and to Apple and to some of the larger corporations. You have to have a really good resume to be accepted at some of those companies. And it was that way with these rabbis. They would quiz you. They would check you out. They would banter with you about law because they were trying to determine if they invest their life in you, will you be able to be like them? So these young kids at 15 years of age would petition a rabbi, please let me serve under you. Let me be your disciple. Let me be your student. Now, rabbis were experts in the law. Rabbis each had a different interpretation of the law. Many times they were similar with a little bit of difference in them. So if the rabbi said, this is what I believe being clean when you eat, this is how I interpret it. You have to take the bar of soap and you have to wash each hand 5 times and hold it under warm water until you count to 20. This is my teaching. Well, another rabbi would say, well, no. That's not my teaching because that's not the way I see the law. I believe that you take the bar of soap and you got to wash your hands for a full minute. And then you put them under cold water only, and then you dry them off with a clean towel and throw the towel away. And then another rabbi said, no. That's not my take of the law. Oh, I've got a different take. Do you see where I'm going? Each rabbi had his own interpretation of law. And when you followed a rabbi, you followed their interpretation of the law. It was called taking the rabbi's yoke. Do you remember when Jesus said, take my yoke upon you, for my burden is light. Learn of me. That's what he was saying. He was saying, follow my teaching, my interpretation of law. Take my yoke upon you. As my student, take my yoke upon you. Rabbis entered their ministry at about the age of 30. How many of you know that Jesus started his ministry at age 30? All right. We know that Jesus was a part of this schooling because back when he was a youth and Mary and Joseph had to travel to Jerusalem for the census, it said that when they gathered their stuff to leave, guess what? They weren't very good parents. They forgot Jesus and they left him behind. And they start going home. They're on their way home. They're already a day into it before they realize, dang, we forgot somebody. Where's Jesus? And they know he's God's son. How do you... I would be so afraid. We just left God's son. We didn't put him in... Oh my gosh. They go running back and they search for him. And where did they find him? It says that he was found sitting with the leaders and the teachers of the law, and he was bantering with them, and they were amazed at his great understanding of law. Early in Jesus' life, through this educational process, it was known through his town that he was an up-and-coming rabbi. Everybody knew it. They're just waiting for him to start his ministry. But it's interesting that when Jesus decides to start, he's found walking along the beach, and he goes to Peter and John, who at this time were somewhere between the age of 15 and age 20. And he says to Peter and John, follow me. Now, let's stop for a minute. they weren't the best of the best. They probably didn't even go through the second phase. They dropped out at age 10. They learned the family business. They apprenticed under their dad. They became expert fishermen. And here's Jesus. They know him as the rabbi. And he says to them, leave your nets and follow me. And what do? They immediately drop everything and follow him. Have you ever read the Bible and wondered what would cause a man to do that? I mean, if a dude comes down the street and I don't know him, and he says, follow me, I'm going to go, you got to be nuts. I ain't following you nowhere, especially if you want me to leave my business and leave my path. Follow you? I don't even know you. But they knew this is the up-and-coming rabbi. Can you imagine being the dropout? And the up-and-coming rabbi is all of a sudden now choosing you? What an honor! They probably looked at each other and went, me? He wants me? Why didn't I'm not that student. I'm not that bright guy. I didn't petition with other rabbis. He wants me? He's picking me, really? Because to follow the rabbi was the highest honor one could be given. It meant you were the best of the best. You were the best of the crop. You were it, man. You were it. You had what it takes. You were going to be the next rabbi. And these men are picked, and Jesus walks along, and he picks Matthew, and he picks James. He just goes picking people. He picks people that nobody would pick. And he says, I believe in you. Follow me. Here's the problem that we have. Here's the problem. That when the rabbi picked you, it meant that you were called to make a decision. And the decision was this, that to follow the rabbi, you left your family. Jesus even said that. Let the dead bury the dead. Any man puts his hand to the plow, looks back, he's not worthy to be my disciple. Because to follow the rabbi as a disciple, it meant you left your family. It meant you left your synagogue. It meant you left your home. It meant you left your trade. It meant you left everything and dedicated your life on one thing singular, to be the disciple of the rabbi. That was it, man. That's all there was to it. I'm a disciple of the rabbi. Nothing else. My goal in life is singular, to be a disciple of the rabbi. Now, I understand I do other things, and I work, and I this, and I that, but my ultimate goal, my focus in life, is to be a disciple of the rabbi. He called me, and when he called me, I said, yes, I will follow you. It is a lifelong commitment. It is not a commitment on Easter. It is not a commitment on Christmas. It is a commitment day in and day out. The goal of the rabbi's disciple was to learn what the rabbi knew. Shame on you if you say, I'm following Jesus, and you never open the book. If you don't open the book, you are not learning what the rabbi knows. My second goal is, in learning what he knows, is to be like who he is. The more I learn of him, the more I become like him. The third goal is, the more I become like him, the more I do what he does. let me I'm going to take you real quick to Acts. Acts, and I don't know. I'm going to read to you from a different translation, one that I'm experimenting with, and actually I've fallen in love with this, and we may see if we have it in our queue to switch translations. But let me read to you from the Passion Bible. In the book of Acts, when the disciples were brought before the Sanhedrin and the judges and the Pharisees, and they were questioned, there's this interesting portion here while they were being questioned. Let me read to you, those that are questioning them, what they saw. It says, then the council members were astonished as they witnessed the boldness, courage of Peter and John, especially when they discovered that they were just ordinary men who had never been religiously trained. Wow. Then they began to understand the effect that Jesus had on them simply by spending time with Him. It was evident to them that they were uneducated men when it came to religion, but they saw in them Jesus and took note, these must be disciples of that Rabbi Jesus. By the way, as just a side note, what was it that got Jesus killed? It was his yoke of teaching, because he taught things that were contrary to other rabbis' beliefs. And they were so contrary that it produced jealousy in the other rabbis, and they decided they wanted to take his life. It was his yoke that brought him to the cross. It was his teaching. Because he said crazy stuff. He said, I'm going to give you a brand new commandment. What do you mean a new commandment? Isn't there enough? Yeah, but I think there needs to be one more. I'm giving you a new commandment, and the new commandment is this: love your brother as yourself. That's the new commandment I'm giving you. In fact, he gave about 3 brand new commandments, and they all had to do with how we relate to each other. Interesting. He added to the law more law so there would be no mistake in how we respond to each other. But it got him killed. You remember the story when Jesus tells the disciples to get into the boat and go to the other side? And he stayed back to pray, and they launched out, and they were in the middle of the water, and a great storm came up, and they were a little afraid. Jesus gets done praying, and he decides he's going to walk on the water to them in the boat. Remember that story? So he's walking on the water to the boat, and the disciples get scared, and they cry out because they think it's a ghost. And Peter says, Jesus, is that you? And Jesus said, yes. And Peter said, well, if that's you, if that's really you, call me to come walk on the water too. Why would Peter do that? Because remember, the goal of the disciple is to learn what the rabbi knows, to be like the rabbi, and then to do what the rabbi does. Peter is saying, if my rabbi walks on water, then I can walk on water too. Because as his disciple, I am becoming like him so that I can do what he does. So Jesus says, well, get out of the boat and come on, meet me out here. And Peter does. He gets out of the boat and he starts walking on the water. I think the story should stop there. We make way too much about him sinking. The dude, you know, before you cap on my boy Peter for sinking, have you ever walked on water? All right then, put a cork in it. He's out there walking on water going, man, this is pretty awesome. I'm walking on water. Awesome. And the Bible says that when he saw the roughness of the water and the waves and stuff, he starts sinking. And he goes, Jesus, save me. And Jesus, when he reaches down to get him, this is what Jesus says. Jesus says, oh, you of little faith. Jesus wasn't downing him. Actually, Jesus was challenging him. Because his little faith wasn't in Jesus' ability, because Jesus is still standing on water. His little faith was in his belief that he could actually be like Jesus. That's where he was having a hard time. Because in that moment, that instant, he said, man, I'm uneducated. I'm just a fisherman. I'm not one of the top pedigree dudes here. I have no big diplomas behind my name. And he picks me, and then I'm walking on water. But can I actually be like him? And he starts to sink. And Jesus said, you have little faith. Because if I picked you, I've destined you to learn of me, to be like me, and then to do what I do. What was the last thing Jesus said to the disciples when he was taken into heaven? He said, you're going to go out and you're going to perform healings and you're going to cast out devils. You're going to do everything I did but greater. And you're going to make disciples all over the world. We don't do that. Do you do that? We don't do that. It's because we really don't think we can be like him, because we really don't see ourselves as a disciple. That's a cheap word in our culture. We don't see ourselves, even a gang. There was a gang called the Disciples back in my day. We don't see ourselves as a disciple following Christ the Rabbi, and we lose its purpose and its meaning. And we really don't do what he does. Sometimes, but most of the time not. So let me give you a point or two, and then we're going to wrap up, and we'll finish next week. But I want to give you just a couple things. At some point, you got to make a decision to start following. And if you've been around me long enough, you'll know that you know where I stand on certain things. But we make a decision to follow. That decision to follow isn't so much just a prayer. Prayer is good. But a decision to follow isn't reduced to only a prayer. A decision to follow isn't reduced to only coming forward and accepting Christ. A decision to follow isn't reduced to only filling out the guest card in the chair in front of you and coming out to our membership class. A decision to follow isn't so much what you say as what you do. Because all kinds of people make decisions every Sunday and never do what they say they were going to do. They make a decision, I'll follow you, but they don't know what that entails. We've done them a disservice. So before I invite you to follow Christ, I want you to know what it entails, what it costs, what it's all about, because you've got to make an intelligent decision. You make a decision, I'm going to follow him. You know, we do church in some sects. It's called kind of like a church-friendly seeker church. And I think that some of that is good. But I think sometimes we add Kool-Aid to the mix and we water it all down. We want to make it easy for people to follow Jesus. And you can just kind of slip in and slip out. And you just go to this thing and you go to that thing and you go to this seminar. You know what? Jesus was the worst salesman in the world because he never made it easy. In fact, we're going to get to that next week. The title next week is Don't Follow Me. He preached that sermon to a large crowd and they said, okay, well, we're not, and they left. He was left with the 12. He goes, are you going to leave also? They go, I don't know where we're going to go. We've been following you for a while. We left everything to follow you. There's nothing to go back to. You're stuck with us. But he preached the sermon. Don't follow me. Jesus, you're not selling it right. That's not the seeker approach. But he wasn't interested in selling himself. He was interested in telling the truth and then calling you and me to a decision when we know the truth and the weight of it. So follow me. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand. I'm not going to ask you to come forward today. I'm going to ask you to make a decision to start doing it. And not just talk about it, but do it. I'm going to ask you to make a decision tomorrow to begin to learn what the rabbi says and pick the book up. And begin to look at it and say, what is he saying about following him? What does he want from me? What's involved here? And then as you do, your life will change and you will start to be like him. And the more you become like him, people will notice. In fact, Paul said, be ready to give an answer to every man that asks you the hope that is in you. They've got to see something. Talking about it is good. Witnessing is good. I don't tell you don't do that. Do more of it. But if you're not reflecting his image in your life, it'd probably be better that you just shut up. Because you're a poor representative of him. If somebody's going to represent me, I want them to do a good job of it. But when you're out cussing and doing all the crazy stuff that people do, and then you want to tell people about, oh yeah, 5 years ago I gave my heart to the Lord and I go to City Church, don't tell them that. You do more damage than good. So the more you become like him, people start to see it, and they go, whoa, what's the hope that is in you? Now you're qualified to give an answer. And then you begin to do what he does because you're like him in every way. Now you have the authority to tell the devil, shut up, and to rebuke him and to cast him out. You wonder why so many Christians don't have that authority? They like to pretend they do. Oh, I'm going to cast the devil out of here. He just sits and goes, no, you're not. Because they can't. Because they're really not a disciple. They're nothing like Jesus, and they don't carry his authority. But the more you become like him, the more his authority you carry. And the more of his authority you carry, you can command the demonic. You can pray for healing and see healing take place. Because you now do what he does as his disciple. But if you're not a disciple, don't try it. There were a couple of guys in the book of Acts that they did try it. And the Bible said the devil jumped on them and tore them to pieces and ripped them a new one, and they ran around naked, bleeding, and almost dead. Number 2, can you profess being a Christian and actually not know him? I'm sorry, I'm hitting below the belt, aren't I? But I'm tired. I guess I've reached a point in life where I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of Christians that don't mean business. I'm tired of all the double talk. I'm just tired. I'm tired of being tired. Matthew chapter 7, verse 21. Now, I'm not saying this. The rabbi, Jesus, is saying this, and I got to tell you, this about scares the doo-doo right out of me. Verse 21. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the realm of heaven's kingdom. All right, I got that. It is only those who persist in doing the will of my heavenly Father. Oh, you mean I got to do something? I think he just said that. On the day of judgment, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, don't you remember us Didn't we prophesy in your name? Didn't we cast out demons and do many miracles for the sake of your name? But I will have to say to them, go away from me, you lawless rebels. I've never been joined to you. Go away from me, lawless rebels. You know what the word lawless is referring to there? Is you do not attempt to do the will of my Father, which makes you lawless. He's not saying that you're not good people. He's not saying that those hearing this didn't have good jobs and weren't good husbands and good fathers and good mothers. He wasn't saying that. They might have been all good. And they were saying, Lord, Lord, and they were casting out devils, and they were healing people. But in that, Jesus said, I never knew you, because you didn't follow me. I know only the people that follow me. We shared this the other week. There was a saying that the sages said back in this day, that to follow the rabbi, a good disciple, when following the rabbi, followed so close that the dust that the rabbi kicked up while he walked became the dust on the front of your garment. Most Christians today have no dust because they're not following. Or if they are, they're following about 3 blocks away. But according to the sage, that when you followed the rabbi, you followed so close that you ate his dust and gunk and mud and whatever he kicked up while he walked. It was on the front of you, and that was a sign that you followed the rabbi close as his disciple. How much dirt do you have on you? How close are you following? How important is it? See, I can't answer that for you. I can only answer it for me. I took a moment, actually this morning in my office, I took a moment. I was having one of those moments. And I was doing a little math. And I don't say this for any type of look at me, pat me on the back. But as I was doing the math, I was sitting there thinking, here Sunday, and I'm going to pour my heart out the very best that I can. And I started to count years, and I said, how long have I been doing this? And I'm going to tell you how long I've been doing this. I've been doing this for 40 years. 40 years. I think the amount of Sundays that I have not stood up and done what I'm doing today, you can probably count on 1 to 2 hands. And then I started thinking, how many years out of the 40 have I been paid to do this? A lot of my friends make big bucks. And I said, I don't think I've been paid more than 10 years out of the 40. That means for 30 years, I've done it with no compensation. Now, again, I'm not going there. The question is why? Most people would say, Scott, you're crazy. You can invest your life in some other areas and get dividends from it. You are absolutely crazy. Why would you do that? You know why? Because I'm a disciple. And when it comes down to it, if the rabbi says, go, I'm going. If the rabbi says for the next 40 years, you're going to do this, and nobody will give you a dime, guess what? For the next 40 years, I will do it and not expect anything, because I don't follow people, I follow the rabbi, and what he asks of me, I will do it till the day I die. When you make a decision to follow, that's what it comes down to. It's not about you. It's not about what you can get. It's not about what you'll extract. It has nothing to do with that. It has only to do with what did the rabbi ask you to do. I have a Bible verse that I've got plastered on our refrigerator so I never forget it. Jesus spoke this parable. It's only found in one gospel. It's very obscure. Most people go right by it. Nobody has ever taught on it, to my knowledge. Jesus said, when the master comes in from the fields, he says to the servant, where is my dinner? Prepare my food. The servant does what he is asked to do. The servant doesn't say, can I sit down and eat with you? Or wait a minute, I'm preparing a snack for me because I've been working too. No, the parable goes on to say that the servant prepares the food for the master, and the master says, when I'm done eating, you clean up everything, and then you prepare the meal for yourself. Very harsh parable, but Jesus is trying to make a point. Then you prepare the meal for yourself. And he ends the parable by saying, the servant should say, I am nothing but a servant, and I'll do whatever you say. And Jesus says, so should every one of you say the same thing before my Father. I don't know where we came up with thinking we were all that, and expecting all of this and all of that. Let me give you one more verse, and we're going to wrap. I'm going to go to Matthew chapter 7, verse 13 and verse 14. Matthew 7, verse 13 and verse 14. Jesus speaks about two roads, narrow and a wide. He says, come to God through the narrow gate, because the wide gate and broad path is the way that leads to destruction. Nearly everybody chooses the crowded road. The narrow gate and the difficult way leads to eternal life. So few even find it. He said there's a wide road and there's a narrow road. And everybody chooses the wide road. But there's only a few that chooses the narrow road. But it's the narrow road that leads to life. The wide road leads to destruction. Now you have to ask yourself, why do people not choose the narrow road? Because he goes on in the same chapter to tell us why. Because the wide road that everybody's on costs nothing. The narrow road that very few choose costs everything. Let that just settle in for a minute. What is it costing you? And if you say nothing, something's wrong. Something's wrong. Jesus goes on in Matthew to say the narrow road will get some of you arrested, will get some of you hated on by family, will get some of you judged, maybe even jailed. That's what the narrow road cost. That's why not many people choose it. It's easy to choose the wide road because it costs very little. But when you choose the narrow road, you give up who you are. You give up your pride. You give up all of your ambitions. You make a choice that the main thing, the important thing, the critical thing is my being a disciple. Everything else is peripheral. I like nice things, and I like to be blessed, and I like to go to nice places, and I like all of that stuff. But it's not the main thing. It's not the main thing. If I have to live broke and serving Him in the area that He has asked me, then so be it. I will gladly live broke. Because that's the main thing. And when I go to heaven, it's all about the main thing. Don't kid yourself. When you stand before God, it is not about the little sub things that we like to deal with. It's about one thing, the main thing. Follow me. Did you do that? That's what it's about. And your eternity is dependent on that one thing. Did you follow? Did you follow me? I asked you to. What do you do when Jesus asks you? You say yes or you say no. He didn't allow people to say, I got to think about it, I got to decide. He says, no, it's a yes or no. You got to think about it. Goodbye. I'm moving on. I don't have time. I don't have time. You're either in or you're out. I've been doing church for 40 years. Actually, longer than that. I've been in the ministry for 40. I was saved before that. It's amazing to me, the people. Well, I ain't coming no more because I didn't like the potluck. Really? Pastor, I'm not coming because y'all asked me to help in the kitchen, and I don't do kitchens. I don't help in no kitchen. Oh, wait a minute. Here's a good one. Oh, you expect me to sing on the worship team, and you're going to pay me what? Oh, heck no. I'm worth more than that. It seems to me, when I see that, I go, they're on the broad road. They're walking the broad road, the wide road. Oh, they're going, Lord, Lord. Didn't we prophesy? Didn't we? Oh, they're making all the claims, but they're not a disciple. Because the disciple, when the potluck goes bad, they realize it ain't about me. It's about glorifying the rabbi. Oh, the disciple, when asked to do something, the disciple's all happy to clean toilets if that's what you ask. Because when it comes down to it, all I am is a servant. Nothing more. And if I'm a disciple, you can't offend me. You can try awfully hard, but you can't offend me because Jesus said to me in this book, He said it to me, Scott. And He didn't say Pastor Scott. He said, Scott, I give you a new commandment. You start loving everybody as your brother, as you would love yourself. That's the new commandment I give you. As a disciple, I am obedient. You can't offend me. Good luck in trying. Good luck in trying. Because it has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with Him. I'm His disciple. And if He asks me to love, you can do all kinds of garbage to me and say all kinds of bad stuff about me. I'm going to love you anyway. That's what it is to be a disciple. I had as a last point, and we're not going to really get to it, we're done, but it was evidence that demands a verdict. I love the law, not just biblical law. I love the law. I have this like for law and court and all that stuff. At one point, had I not gone in the ministry, I was either going into art field or I was actually going to pursue a legal degree. I wanted to be a public defender. Went to law school for a very short time, and I realized that's not where God was having me go. So after a year or so, about a year, I canceled out. I gave up my attorney dreams. But you know what? I've lived a life as a disciple instead, and I'd much rather stand and say I followed the direction He gave me rather than the direction I wanted to go. But that being said, I know enough about law that I know that when you go to court, what is it that gets you off? And what is it that gets you convicted? The evidence. The lack of evidence, you're going to walk. So if I'm defending you, I'm going to dispute all the evidence that prosecution throws on the table. But if there is enough evidence, you get convicted. When we stand before God at the end of time, He's looking at the evidence. The question you have to ask, and I have to ask, is there enough evidence to convict me as a disciple? Only you can answer that. Is there enough evidence to convict me as a disciple? Is the evidence overwhelming? Or would there be lack of evidence and the decision would never be made? If you go to your neighbor, is there enough evidence in your life that the neighbor would convict you for being a disciple? Or would they go, what? I never knew. When you go to your job, those that you work around, is there enough evidence to convict you? I would start checking it out because there's coming a day where God's going to analyze the evidence. And at that point, it's out of your control. With your family, is there enough evidence to convict you for being a disciple? Or do they know you go to church and they laugh about it because they know it's just a joke in your life? What does the evidence say? Because it's the evidence that produces the verdict. I prayed a prayer this morning before I came out. Me and God had a real heart-to-heart talk. And I prayed a prayer. I've been praying it for a while, but I was serious as a heart attack this morning. My prayer was this: God, I don't know how many more years I have. You don't know that either. But I'm asking you for two things. And I want you to grant them to me. One, I want you to grant me the ability to go deeper in your word like I've never done before. I'm a student, but I'm not all that bright. So sometimes God has got to give me revelation a couple times on my thick head to get me to get it. Because I'm not that bright. I'm not an A student. I've all but made it through high school with D's and F's, okay? So my prayer is, help me to know what Dr. John knows. Open it up. And my second prayer was, help me to do more for you than I am doing now. Because this ain't enough for me. This ain't enough for me. I'm not content. I'm not content with what I do. I gotta know that I am doing more. I want to do more. I'm asking you to let me do more. I'm asking you to open doors so that the remainder of my life I will do twofold what I have done to this point. That's my prayer. And when I walked out of my office, somehow I felt God said, I heard you. I heard you. And if that's what you really want, then that's what I will do. What is your prayer for your life? What's your prayer? Life is more than showing up at the company and clocking in and clocking out. I'm not saying don't do that. You got to put bread on the table. I get it. But life is more. And I'm going to leave you with that.